Hello BookTube and welcome to an early edition of Weekly Reads. This Friday and next Friday I will be filming Weekly Reads at my afternoon filming time rather than my early evening filming time, which is when I usually do Weekly Reads, because Big Brother is airing Friday episodes this week and next week. This week because Big Brother is being preempted on Sunday by the Emmys, and next week because it's the finale week, and usually Big Brother has a Friday episode the week before the finale on Wednesday. So, almost to the end. So this Weekly Reads, or this reading week, has been rather bad for the most part. It started bad, had a bit of a bright spot, and then ended rather badly. So let's get started. So I started the reading week with the plan to read Space Opera for Space Opera September. Space Opera September is a BookTube reading event in which participants read space opera in the month of September. I had planned to reread A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine over the weekend, and then move on to a Desolation Called Peace during the work week. A Memory Called Empire is the story of Mahit Zamir, who has just been appointed ambassador from Lisol Station to the Taix Kalani Empire, who have demanded a new ambassador. Mahit's remit is to find out what happened to her predecessor and to protect the interests of Lisol Station from the ambitions of the Taix Kalani Empire. Within the Taix Kalani Empire, there are machinations, chaos, political intrigue, of which Mahit's predecessor was deeply involved, which led to his murder and further political chaos within the empire. While Mahit is trying to figure out what happened to her predecessor and navigate the cutthroat world of Taix Kalani politics, there is a looming alien threat lurking at the borders of Taix Kalani space that forms the main conflict for the sequel, a Desolation Called Peace, in which Three Seagrass, the liaison and girlfriend of Mahit, takes responsibility to try to make contact with these mysterious aliens, and while she's at it, she recruits Mahit too, who, after the events of A Memory Called Empire, is sort of doing something or other that I'm not entirely sure makes any sense at all, but anyway. So, I wanted to have another go at A Memory Called Empire, in part because one of the prompts for Space Opera September, if participants weren't going to do the buddy reads, was to read a duology, and at the moment these form a duology. But I also wanted to have another go at A Memory Called Empire because I have an unsettled opinion about it. I love the climax. The climax of this book is amazingly well done. Just so effective. But I'm not as fond of the rest of the story. And rereading the story this time around, I've kind of figured out why. I know what my problem with this story is and why I think the climax is so effective. And the climax is so effective because Mahit is not the center of attention. Yes, she's our point of view character, but she's not at the center of events. She is an observer. And I think that's the problem with the rest of the story, is that Mahit is not really the best protagonist for this story. You just... Yeah, I mean... I think it comes off, the plot progression just comes off as a bit artificial, I think. And it's hard to buy such a young character being an ambassador and being an embassy of one. And I understand in part why Mahit Zamir is so young and why she is an embassy of one. But I don't know if I don't buy it. I don't think it really works. I think the reason why, for being the only one there and at the embassy and being so young, I think in part is inspiration. Arkady Martine is a Byzantinist. She studies the Byzantine Empire. And in earlier centuries, countries' embassies to each other could be relatively small. I mean, an ambassador, but also a secretary and a household. So there would be a need for multiple people. And as politics get more complex, as international relations get more complex, you need more people. And I think in a way, Mahit definitely needed a much larger embassy, or LaSalle Station needed a much larger embassy. But also I think there is a tendency for her youth, a tendency for younger characters in science fiction and especially fantasy, where perhaps older characters would work better. But anyway, so I think that has always been one of my problems. But I also don't think some of the plot progression necessarily works all the time. Most of the plot progression up until that climactic scene, I don't think really works all that well. Which ended up making me not particularly want to read a Desolation called Peace. I read the first few chapters. Thankfully, Mahit isn't the only point of view character. There are a number of new characters. But again, yeah, I think perhaps maybe a whole new cast of characters would have worked better. But I didn't get really too far into the novel to really see for sure whether or not Mahit and Three Seagrass really could have been replaced, or like somebody else could have come in as a protagonist or something. But anyway, so I was very disappointed in those two. So I basically searched around to try to figure out, okay, what do I want to read next? And I decided on a book I passed on at the end of the History Challenge that happened at the end of August. I had read a number of books, and by the time the 2 weeks were up and I had one book left, I really didn't want to read it. I kind of wanted to move on to something else. But I decided to come back to it this week and actually enjoyed it, and that is Empires of the Week by J.C. Sharman. This is a very short book that challenges one of the most popular explanations for the victory of the West, the military revolution thesis, in which European great states sort of, through the crucible of the 30 Years' War, were forced to adapt, to advance. And in order to keep up with these advances, the states had to advance further. And these advancements led to Europe's eventual domination of the rest of the planet. J.C. Sharman argues that no, this is most certainly not what happened, that this thesis is demonstrably wrong, in that the period that is most often focused on through the military revolution thesis is, except for the Americas, and even there were limits in coastal city-states and fortifications. Europeans were actually either playing like an equal game with the African and Asian great states, or were even in more subordinate positions that oftentimes with military engagements, particularly on land, the Europeans more often lost than won. That the Europeans, excepting for the Americas, and even there were limits, dominated on the open oceans, but within shallower waters or on land, their success rate was not, they lost more often. That the Europeans didn't really start to begin the conquests until like the later end of the 18th century, and most definitely into the 19th century. And that this was in part due to the Industrial Revolution, but also just random crises that happened in the Ottoman and Mughal and Qing empires. And of course, he also takes a bit of a longer view from the 21st century, looking back on the all too brief period of empire in the 19th century and early 20th century. So this book was really, really quite good and really thought-provoking, and I really enjoyed it. I'm pleasantly surprised. I thought after my brief look at it in late August that maybe this book wasn't going to be that good, but it actually turned out to be quite good. And then everything collapsed. After I finished Empires of the Week, I had some more time, so I decided to start on Empires of Vice, The Rise of Opium Prohibition Across Southeast Asia by Diana S. Kim. This is a book about how the British and the French regulated the opium trade in Burma, Malaysia, and Vietnam. And how, while there was some prohibition, that a lot of it was also monopoly, that the state, the colonial government, controlled access to opium. And how this opium monopoly affected the revenues of the various colonies or colonial governments. This is a very fascinating subject. Unfortunately, Diana Kim's writing style, it's very academic. It is very dull and dry, and while I did make an impressive inroad on Tuesday, or Wednesday, it was Wednesday, when I started the book get up again on Thursday, and I'd hoped that once she finished the introductory section and the macro view, and she got to the more specific chapters on Burma, Malaysia, and Vietnam, she would give this narrative, it would be a bit more narrative, a bit crisper. But I started reading, and about 30 minutes later, I'd only finished about 7 pages. And I'm like, I was dispirited. I couldn't do it anymore. I just decided to bail, and I ended up laying down for a little bit and moped for a good 20 minutes. So that was disappointing. Of course, yesterday was a rather disappointing day in general because at the end of my double tag Thursday, I was definitely feeling low energy. I definitely needed a nap and to lie down for a little bit. And I did, but I think I needed a bit more of one. So yesterday was just disappointing. Fortunately, I did not go nuts and end up spending $40 or $50 on poetry from Princeton University Press. Even though I'm kind of thinking of doing that sometime later this month or into October. Anyway, so I'm still a little bit upset about Empires of Ice, which actually kind of caused some controversy within the family because everybody was thinking I had a headache, and it's like, no, I'm just depressed about not making much progress. Anyway, so I have a pile of possibilities for today and the coming week. So I'm going to start with the science fiction and fantasy. I think they're actually all fantasy. And then do some general fiction. And then I have some history. So let's get started because there are quite a few. And I don't know exactly who I'm going to pick. I'm just going to randomly pick one and see where we go. So with the fantasy, the options are Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno. Let me repeat. Silvia Moreno-Garcia, which I think is a deco-punk novel that sees the main character interacting with Mayan gods of the dead. And then two rereads. One would be Kings of the Wyld by Nicholas Eames. This is a hilarious epic fantasy that takes as its conceit mercenaries being treated like rock stars. And it is a trip. It has been far too long since I've read that book. And Gather the Fortunes by Bryan Camp. This is the sequel to City of Lost Fortunes. And this book switches the protagonist from Jude to Renee and her job as a psychopomp. And discovering one day that one of her expected, the people she's been assigned to guide to the other side, has disappeared, that he isn't actually dead. And she's kind of got to figure out what happened and try not to see the end of the world. For the general fiction, I've still been meaning to get to There by Tommy Orange. I would also like to get to or reread Night at the Fiestas by Kirstin Valdez Quade. This is a collection of short stories that I read a few years ago and quite enjoyed, and I'm kind of thinking about picking up her debut novel, The Five Wounds, which has been languishing in my Amazon cart for ages. And then I'm also thinking of doing some Bale redemptions. So these might not necessarily be the books I choose for this coming week. But there's A Crooked Little Heart by Lamott. This is the story of a woman who is depressed and still struggling with the death of her first husband, her shaky second marriage, and her tennis prodigy daughter's move to adolescence. I tried this book several times last year, and while the book is wonderfully well written, there's a point in the book where I'm just not quite feeling it. But I would like to try to make a push to actually finish it, because it's not a bad book, it's just hasn't worked for me yet. And the same is true, I would say, of The Lesser Bohemians by Eimear McBride, which, again, I have tried a few times. This is a more stream of consciousness novel about a young woman who is a drama school student who gets involved with an older actor. And I've been really disappointed that I haven't gotten further in with that one as well. And then we have the history options, which are quite large too. Because even though, obviously, I did not get on with Empires of Ice, and my reaction to it is certainly an overreaction, which is something I am prone to do. I did want to have a go at quite a few of the history books too. So the first option here is Raised to Rule, Educating Royalty at the Court of the Spanish Habsburgs, 1601 to 1634 by Martha K. Hoffman. Been looking forward to getting to this book for quite a while. Also a book that came out last year, which I might hold off until October because of the subject matter, and that is Magic, A History from Alchemy to Witchcraft, from the Ice Age to the Present by Chris Gauston. So this definitely, I'm thinking, because of the subject matter, to hold off until December. So that's what I might do with that one. And then two other books that I really want to get to are Philip and Alexander, Kings and Conquerors by Adrian Goldsworthy. This is a dual biography of Alexander the Great and his father Philip II of Macedon. I usually read an Alexander the Great biography in November, and I might stick with that. I don't know for sure. So this is a possibility for this week, but I might also hold off until November to do my annual Alexander biography in November. And finally, I'm also thinking of reading Pieter M. Hudson's or Judson's The Habsburg Empire, A New History, which I've been looking forward to for quite a while. So, yeah. Anywho, so let's do a steep pyramid of the possibilities, because I did forget to do a pyramid for my August book haul. And I think, given that I'll be doing weekly reads tomorrow, or next Friday, relatively early, I'm going to hold off until the 30th to do my September book haul. But this is in no way, shape, or form a decently organized thing, but anyway. So, these are the pile of possibilities for this coming week. And I will report back next Friday on who got selected. And then, of course, trying to put them down as pain in the butt. Anyway, BookTube, thank you. Have a great rest of your day and weekend. And I will see you next Monday with hopefully some tag videos. If not, I'll maybe do a video of some sort or another. Or definitely I will do a video on Tuesday for Tag Tuesday. But anyway, BookTube, thank you. Have a great weekend and stay safe.